neurodivergence. You know what? Can we skip this? NDAF. Perfect.
Hee-haw. Hello, Sam. This is Mark Wheaton, and welcome to another episode of NDAF, a space in which neurodivergent folks and their friends can talk all things spectrumy in any messy direction they want. With me, as always, is my silent, never-speaking producer and engineer, Ken Plume. This week, we're honored to be speaking with poet and writer Caroline Hung, who joins us from Manila, the Philippines. You may know her poetry from her numerous appearances in Strange Horizons, as well as in 34 Orchard, the Asian food zine You Are What You Eat, and the Thames Review. Her fiction, also in Strange Horizons, Nightmare Magazine, Xanax Hamster, Choreo Magazine, and where I was first introduced to her, Spectrum, an autistic horror anthology from Third Estate, as well as many other places online, including her short travels, which you can follow on Blue Sky. Without further ado, here's Caroline. Thank you so much for doing the show.
No, it's my pleasure, yeah.
And we are very honored to have you here. It's funny to, I might not have memorized all the titles of the things that I've read of yours, but what's amazing is whenever I think of them, they're so viscerally written, I can feel like kind of the heat that comes off of one. I can kind of see the colors. Because they are so sensory heavy, it's like I'll look at a couple of paragraphs of one and be like, oh, wow, that's the one that has this bubbling description of flowers. And this one like feels a lot of metal. This one's at night where there's the magpies flying over the dark sky. So it's such a visceral experience reading your writing. So I was really excited to talk to you about it today.
Thank you so much for the compliment. Yeah, that really makes me happy to hear. I think because if we're talking about description and like the lush world building you were talking about, I'm a really big fan of like the escapism in fiction. So that's some of the most important elements to me. The escapism and, something that makes you pause and read slower to like fully take in the view. Like that's my favorite thing to write. And I also write a lot of fantasy, mainly inspired by my heritage, both Filipino and Taiwanese culture and the folklore especially. I always want to leave a strong or lasting impression in the reader's mind. So that's what I always strive for. And besides that, I also love finding ways to convey a character's emotion through their surroundings. So yeah, like you said, big on sensory aspects. But yeah, I try not to overdo it sometimes because, it could easily overwhelm the reader. So yeah.
Even when characters are eating together, it's still a very sensory experience. Even when people are just sitting together and talking, you feel that because of how sensory everything has been up to that point, you just feel like you're there with them. You're smelling the smells of the food, or in some cases, smelling things that are much worse, depending on the story. And so that's been a real pleasure in exploring your work. If you can talk about how you got started, like what was your first writing? Was it poetry? Was it prose? How did you begin and about how old were you?
I was around maybe 10, kid aged. And I actually started off writing fan fiction. It was for a cartoon, Teen Titans.
Excellent.
Yeah. I started on fanfiction.net. So from there, I eventually heard about fictionpress.com for original fiction. So back then it was just an on and off hobby. I did not think seriously about writing until maybe my late teens. And that was a point when I experienced major depression. And if I look back now as an adult, I realize I've always showed symptoms of OCD and autism, and that did interfere with daily life. And yeah, life felt very much like a constant performance. So that was really exhausting. And yeah, whenever I just shut down, I just turned to writing because I find joy and great comfort in fiction, like books, shows, or video games. So yeah, just pure escapism.
So when you said you were doing it as fan fiction, kind of doing it for fun, was it reader validation? What switched it over to, wait, I can do this professionally. Wait, this is something that's much more than a hobby.
There came a point when, I was just really at my lowest and I felt like I had nothing left for me but writing. So something like that. And yeah, it's one of the only few things that truly give me a sense of fulfillment. And I'm lucky enough that I could pursue writing as a career. Even with writing, I'm still suffering through, depression, OCD. And yeah, I must have been fixating on that pain and negativity, which I think shows a lot in my writing, but it was more of emotional transition, I guess. Yeah.
Were you formally diagnosed? Did you seek out kind of help for that? Was there help available at school, at home, or in the medical? Were there people that you were able to talk to about this, or did you get a formal diagnosis, or was this just, I have to deal with this on my own. I have to explore this with my own writing?
Yeah, there was really no support in my case. Yeah, I grew up in a very conservative Christian school. My family also didn't really know much about mental health or neurodivergence. So most of it was just really self-diagnosing, looking at resources on the internet, talking to people, writers actually, who were also going through the same things as I was. And that community was really, was really important.
You can speak to it a little bit. How does it, as you become much more of a professional writer, as you generate quite a lot of material, does your neurodivergence help with that? The concentration, the kind of discipline, does it take away from it? How does your neurodivergence work in your creative life?
Oh, yes. It certainly adds to my creative life in the sense that, it fuels a lot of my inspiration, especially with my recent stories. I feel like I could just express myself fully, or the emotion that I couldn't put anywhere else. And yeah, I think that helps me create sort of narrative that's truly mine or unique to my artistic sense, stuff like that. Yeah, and every time I get a story sale or a poetry sale, I'm really grateful when an editor takes a chance on me. Because, yeah, I feel like a lot of my stories have those unconventional structures or perspectives that I think was influenced a lot by my neurodivergence and such. Yeah.
I was reading one of the drabbles that you posted online. I think it was called 7 of 1,000. And it's the one with the embarrassing interaction, evening instead of morning. And I was like, I remember reading that and just being like, wow, I can relate to that taste of a neurodivergent social interaction. And then it's like, oh, thank God, the world's destroyed. Oh, thank goodness, everything's been incinerated. I don't actually have to deal with this. And I was like, that is a perfect encapsulation of the kind of shame and humiliation of that sort of interaction. I thought that was so delightful and so well captured. So I was just like, I have to read everything else now. So congratulations on kind of nailing it with that.
Well, thank you.
I guess when you're approaching characters, there are a lot of young characters.
Yeah.
In the fiction that you're writing, there's certainly a lot of neurodivergent writing out there. The writing you do, it doesn't call autism. It doesn't call these things because it's in a fantasy milieu. Do you do that for a reason? Is it better for you to take yourself out of it and approach things as people are kind of devouring a sensory space and relating that through neurodivergence? Or is neurodivergence something you get to write about in order to step away from it? Like, how do you, when you're creating characters and you want to talk about neurodivergence, do you create neurodivergent characters or do you create neurodivergent situations?
I think it's more of the first thing. I create neurodivergent characters because I put a lot of myself into every character, actually. And I don't specifically aim to call it this is autism or she's super anxious or something like that. I think part of it is because I'm mostly self-diagnosed. And there's still the part of me where I'm not so confident if I could actually say that I'm this or say that I'm writing that. Like, am I qualified or maybe, I'm faking it or not. I don't know. It's a bit complicated. So I feel like I'd rather describe or portray the neurodivergence through the character, and then whoever relates to it, well, I'll be glad if they find some relation, find comfort, or, just see themselves like you said.
Yeah. I saw a lot of that when I read Survive Lot 666 after talking to Kino, and just the way you write the sensory experience of the world. like in the details. So it's like, oh, okay, this is something that I really relate to, this kind of almost second person, like you will see this and you will see that as you kind of move through it. And I was like experiencing it sentence by sentence. And then when I went back, sorry, I have whole pages of quotes that I took
Wow.
of just the kind of writing, this very visceral, especially in War Makes Flowers, where it was just almost overwhelming. It was so sensory. And I was just like, oh, okay. So it's really that sort of writing. And I don't respond to everything. I don't respond to everything from my own autism. It has to be a very heightened emotional situation. And usually it's story based, or usually it's some cliffhanger thing. But to be wrapped up in your writing of a world that is so heightened in that way and so emotional in the sensory experience, I was like, I don't think I've ever read anything quite like that before. And so it was really interesting to have that kind of experience. And I wonder have you spoken to other people who've had similar experiences with your writing like that?
I don't think I have. I'm fortunate to have really amazing writer friends though. And yeah, I'm always very happy whenever someone says I wrote a good thing and they enjoyed it. And I really appreciate when people connect to the thing that I'm writing, because, I felt very alone in these feelings. So maybe the writing is a way also for me to reach out and hopefully, even if it's one-sided, I can extend my feelings in some way, express myself.
Do you have things that you've read that you're saying, oh, I want to emulate that? Or have you had that experience with writing where you're reading something and you're like, oh, that matches my experience, whether it's in neurodivergent written media or neurodivergent coded written media? Have you ever saw something that you felt was a successful representation of neurodivergence that you related to on a personal level?
Yes, I did experience something similar. I'm not sure if I would say that I related completely to it, but it certainly resonated. I was reading Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin, and the character Jed and his journey, it felt like this depression journey for him, kind of, just to very roughly describe it. And yeah, and I was reading it in a point of my life where I was just rock bottom. So somehow it was comforting. And that sort of thing is what also inspires me to write the way I do, even if it doesn't totally relate to someone, if it can still somehow move their heart and soul, then I'll be satisfied. Something like that.
When you're approaching something, when you have like a character for it, what you were describing with coming with a character and kind of building out from there, how do you decide, and I guess this is probably the most annoying question a poet can get, how do you decide if something is a poem? How do you decide if something is prose for you personally?
Well, I started fiction at a young age, but I am fairly new to writing poems. And I realized some of my ideas, they're just more drawn to one form or another. Like certain concepts or emotions, I felt more comfortable exploring in poems. Like a good example is the Ligaya series. Where is Ligaya? That series of poems. I first envisioned it as a travel or microfiction series, but then I set out to write the first piece, and then it wasn't a conscious effort at all, but it came out more like a poem than prose, and I just ran with it. And that same poem, it got published in Strange Horizons 2023. And that was very encouraging to me because, I'd never published poetry before, never even written it much, but I did read it a lot. I love Marie Howe, by the way. Yeah. So yeah, it's like in the poetry I write, the repetition works for the theme. Like it's an enduring thing. Like, where is Ligaya? Where is Ligala? For every poem, we keep searching for this ever elusive, mysterious girl. And yeah, it's just really fun. And I think, I'm probably fixated on themes and similars in the same characters across different pieces. Yeah, I tend to fixate. It's familiar and safe. Yeah.
Anyone listening, you can find those poems in strangehorizons.com right now. So if you want to race over there as you're listening, actually read those yourself. With your stories, though, with Halloween Notes from the Bloody Mary of the Philippines and Dear Reader, because of the form that you take with both, they kind of read like prose, but you could perform them as poetry. Do you consider those two pieces, do you consider them a story, or do you consider them poetry, or do you consider them almost like an essay? How do you see that kind of writing, where it's very, very structured outside of prose, but still is read line to line?
It could be both. Yeah, it could be both. That's what I love about poetry. There's a lot of freedom and experimentation. And also, the flash or microfiction as a whole is also lends to a lot of experimentation. So, yeah, I think there is a lot of overlap, and you could say it's one or the other. There are prose poems as well. So, yeah, I like the flexibility between the two.
We have invited you, if you would like to read for us. Do you have pieces that you have brought?
Yes, I have this new piece that I'm really proud of, though it has not seen the light of day.
That's great.
Yeah, I could. Okay. Should I just go ahead and?
Absolutely. You have a very, very attentive audience.
Okay. This is my poem called Luna. Little dragonfly, take my wings and save yourself. Pluck every feather from my body. This cage is too big to trap one so small. I have lived long only to set you free. I would sacrifice 1,000 lives for your sake alone. We will never meet again, and you must not think of the caged bird as you soar high through blue sky. Leave this place and do not look back before time runs out, before the life fades in yours. Little one, who delivers 1,000 wishes, hopes and dreams beyond your own. Go fast, unfettered, iridescent dragonfly. That's it.
That was great. Thank you. When did you write that?
Last year, September.
And what were you thinking about?
Yeah, I remember it clearly because this is actually part of a poetry book that I was working on. It was around September when I finished it. And this was one of the last pieces. So yeah, very dear.
So it's coming out?
No. Well, I'm still shopping it around. So I hope, someday it will get published, but we shall see.
Would you consider that? I know some of your work is very overtly political, and some of it is very what we call like sci-fi, like climate fiction, but some of it is very much about authoritarianism. Where would you feel that one? Because, I've heard it one time, but where would you feel that kind of falls into your work before we get into that?
This one is more of, I wrote this poem to convey sort of like a sort of hope, a growing hope. Like even if I'm doomed, you're not. So sort of like passing a message or passing a legacy on to future generations or like whoever comes after me, stuff like that. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily political, but it could be.
Could be seen as political if you think this generation is in trouble, I guess.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, something like that. Because the book, that poetry manuscript is very depressing, and I wanted something like pieces to help alleviate that despair.
I'm really not going to pronounce this properly. Is it Ticket Po Mamser?
Yeah, that's
Ticket Po Mamser?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That is an incredible piece. And I remember reading like the first line and I was like, oh, collapses into an airport lobby. And I was like, oh, it's contemporary. It's going to be and it's like, no. It's still, you are writing as you write. And I was just like, as it went along, I was like, wow, this feels like this was written this morning. And it is obviously extraordinarily impactful to us over here in America as we're watching very rapid authoritarianism coming to power in this nation. And reading it, I was just hoping you could maybe speak a little about kind of when you came up with that piece, what you were thinking about with that piece and how it goes, how it just, as it becomes this like Kafka nightmare, but with fantastical elements. If you could just talk a little about where that piece, what you saw, what you're reacting to with that and what you were thinking about in creating it.
As we all know that, global news tends to get really distressing. Yeah, there's geopolitics also where I'm at, like tensions, like the news is always just bang, bang, bang. But yeah, and so I wrote that story, Ticket Po, Ma'am Sir. Like I was just injecting like pure panic, desperation, and the fear that I imagined, I would go through in worst case scenarios. I mean, and I was thinking about Palestine, the ongoing genocide, Gaza, and that really affects me. Like I'm sure most people are, affected a lot. But yeah, it was at some point I just really didn't know how to think or how else to feel if I didn't write that story, if I didn't, it's sort of a way for me to gain a better understanding myself and how to cope with a tragedy like that, tragedies. And I put a lot of myself into that story. If people read it, maybe you could say I put too much of myself into it. But I don't know. At the time, I didn't care if it got too personal because, as we've seen, life is so short and fragile. And I just thought, like, if I were on my deathbed right now, would I think, oh, thank God I didn't open up. Thank God.
Right. Well, you capture well both the panic, but also the exasperation, the just exhaustion at the implacability and stupidity faced in the story. I don't want to give too much away. I won't be able to read this, but it is so, because of again, my sensory reaction to your writing, you just get the sweaty coldness of like fluorescence, and you just feel just power being drained out by just the most banal elements as this person's just trying to get from point A to point B. And that's really, I mean, there's a lot of news stories that talk about the panic, but the exasperation, how long things are, just that stretching and removal of somebody's freedom by taking away their time just really, really resonated off the page in that one. And I was really, as I'm sure everybody is by that story, just profoundly affected by your writing in that. It is an amazing encapsulation that feels like a news story, but when it goes away from there, when it takes on fantastical elements, I was just like, I don't know, it takes it away from that. And I was just really blown away by it. So
thank you. Yeah. That's also what I love about speculative fiction. Yeah, it can take a mundane setting and take it as far as you want it to go. Yeah.
If I can go straight to Halloween Notes from the Bloody Mary of the Philippines, the thing that kind of stopped me in my tracks, obviously because of my current political situation, was number 16. The last but not least, you must remember, war will come for you too. It always does. Just you wait.
Oh my God.
I mean, I was like going along through the story, and then I got there and I'm just like, the war is here. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little about the creation of that piece also. And the title as well, which obviously with the urban because of their horror association with that, I was just kind of like, oh, what's this one going to be about? So very intrigued.
So with regard to that last point, number 16, that line, I really wanted to put that in because, I don't know, I knew my audience was, mainly English speaking. So that means mainly from the West. And somehow I just wanted more people who aren't from where I am to maybe try or maybe understand what it's like to have these sort of thoughts. Maybe people in other countries don't really feel as alarmed or they don't feel as afraid when things get messy political wise. But, I know the situation's kind of changed in the USA right now. But yeah, and I once said that I wrote that piece, Halloween Notes. I once said that I wanted to inflict my fear upon others, or like just my intrusive thoughts. And maybe that is mean-spirited, I don't know. But
I think it works great. So
well, that's a relief, I think saying it's Bloody Mary and also the sprinklings of Filipino folklore, like the capre, that's something I put consciously, like there needs to be this identity from where I am. And then, just wrap it up in a provocative ending line. And that was it. That was my thought process. Yeah, for that piece.
I mean, we feel it here because of the fictions and like the scales falling away from like just America has always been what America is. It's so that little lie that everybody tries to tell themselves that little, all that's kind of, it's impossible. The iceberg has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller of the lie that everyone tells themselves. And as it sinks into the ocean, there's just panic. And it's like, no, the fiction, it's this. And it's like, no, your creation myths are a disaster. Do not, you've been believing that too long. So it's a time of transition.
Yeah. Like, the sense of urgency is certainly growing.
Yeah. By the hour. Can you speak more to that about bringing in mythology with both? I mean, not to move straight into this, but I really like when I was reading Moon Rabbit Song and Thousand Petal Song, and then also the very tactile Rainfire Cloud, which I liked a great deal. And then the Tigers of my favorite Taiwanese folktale. Those are very, I mean, there's still issues, but they're so rich with a kind of folk backing. Where did your interest in writing to folklore and bringing that into the stories come from? Were you always interested in folklore? Were you always interested in myth in that way?
Yeah, definitely. As a kid, I was first interested in urban legends, like schoolyard tales and stuff. But the interest started turning towards mythology and folklore as I got older, and I wanted to connect more with my heritage, you know, because even if I was born and raised in the Philippines and my mom is from Taiwan, I still don't feel quite Filipino or Taiwanese enough. Like I'm kind of stuck in between, secret third thing, stuff like that. And it doesn't help that. Like, when I ask myself, why am I most fluent in English? And why do I write in English and not in either of my mother languages? But yeah, anyway, a lot of complicated feelings about that. So yeah, that turned to me looking at folklore, myth, scouring Wikipedia, whatever I could get my hands on, and just using that for my writing. And I want to share it also with other people, you know? It's not as common, especially the pre-colonial myths. That's something I want to work on writing more as well.
Well, I guess if you don't feel a connection to a political geographical history, finding one to the larger cultural and being able to find thing in myth, being able to find relationships in folklore that you're like, oh, that is me. I guess, does that tie you a little better to a cultural heritage that you don't feel you quite 100% inherit?
Yeah, it does. Like, if I connect to these tales of aswang, which are sort of Filipino ghouls, vampires, and then like it said that aswang, they disguise themselves in broad daylight, and then they hate noise. So when I think of that, I think of the Filipino stereotype where they make a lot of noise during large gatherings, and you know, some people have told me that it's sort of superstition rooted in that belief about the aswang. So yeah, instead of I'd complain, oh, it's so noisy. No, wait, it's part of it's part of who we are, something like that.
Do you find yourself being noisy, or do you find yourself being quiet?
I'm really quiet sometimes, but yeah, I'm sensitive to noises. But I could be loud sometimes. Yeah.
I was just asking because there's a lot of noise in your stories. There's a lot of, things go silent, but then there's eruptions and there are gunshots and there are things that are shot at that explode. So there is a quick move into very loud noises that blow off the page. And so you're never quite sure when an asteroid is going to obliterate, an axe swing is going to come. It's a very, things go from silent to the opposite very quickly. Yeah,
it's like a song,
Yeah. I saw that you spoke a little about this before. You mentioned that you've written longer pieces that you're still out there with, you're looking for a new agent for.
Yeah.
What does a story hit you that you're like, oh, it's going to be multi-chapter, it's going to be much longer than this? Because a lot of the stories that I've read definitely feel like there's just this huge background and it's huge future and we're meeting at like an inflection point. And I love that, that's one of my favorite things about fantasy writing, when in short, because you feel this whole world in 10 pages. When you've approached longer pieces, what tells you, oh, I have enough of that for an entire novel-length story?
It mostly depends on the character arc, how much of this certain character I want to explore, for example. Like, how far do I want to take their journey or their suffering?
Yeah.
So yeah, and sometimes with short fiction, sometimes it's just a vignette from a particular scene from this bigger thing that I'm working on. Like in Moon Rabbit Song, it's actually inspired by this other novel that I wrote. So the world building is all there, and I just had to, it was just there for me to use. So yeah, it was easy to, translate because I was so used to it. I was used to living in that big world. So I've had a few novel projects like that where I've taken the big piece and then use it for the little piece. Does that make sense?
When I read Moon Rabbit Song, I was like, I want the full thing. I want the book of these characters in the situation. It was a very beautiful story.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I really, really liked, violent story, but it was just really got into the rhythm of the writing. And I didn't know that it was from a larger piece, but I wanted to see a larger piece from that. So it's pretty great.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
Well, it's fantastic. As I was telling Ken, once you start, you just really I love words. So it's just such a neat thing to be just engaged in the world you create, which I guess directly leads to, what are you working on now? Like, what kind of things, as you kind of progress, are you working on more poetry, more short stories? Kind of what is today for you as a writer?
I'm working on novellas, horror. They're all horror, weird fiction.
Excellent. Love horror.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope, it could be, like, there could be novellas, and maybe there's one that could be a novel, and they're all, let me check. Yeah, they're all kind of themed on certain topic. Like with my poetry book, it's inspired by my mental illness, and then with here, the horror novellas, they're all, cli-fi, they're all cli-fi and anti-authoritarianism. So it's pretty much the same themes from my short fiction, just in longer form. Yeah.
These are big, muscular themes. They really, really are. When you're working on these, though, you mentioned that you're writing in English, but then you're not writing out of your mother tongues. Who do you envision as the readership when you're doing this? Are there readers? Do you engage with readers locally? Do you engage almost primarily with readers far afield and like all over? Like, I'm in Los Angeles. Who is your readership when you're approaching, or is it just yourself?
Yeah, it's primarily myself. But, I feel pretty isolated. So it's nice to feel like I have a bigger reach globally. I feel disconnected in the local scene, but I don't know, maybe it'll change in the future. Yeah, I feel like there's just not as many opportunities locally, especially when you're writing in English.
Are there local writers that you are a fan of? Are there local writers that you feel in competition with? Or do you feel you're writing strictly with people that you're like, oh, this person is in South Africa, this person's in New York, this person is in the English publishing world. Who do you see yourself fighting against? Who do you see yourself comparing yourself to?
I wouldn't think of it as fighting per se. Well,
right.
we're
a horrible word.
Yeah, we're all on the same side or something like that.
Right.
And
inspiring then, not fighting.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know some local authors, especially one of them off the top of my head, Vida Cruz. She does really great work. And I think the first story I've read of hers is about Bakunawa, the Bakunawa folklore about the sea serpent that eats the moon. I can't recall the title right now, but yeah, I found that someone like her, a writer who's from the same background, same country, location, writers like her would understand the struggles of trying to reach a global audience and like the inherent biases that maybe a white dominant speaking audience would have towards a minority. So yeah, it's just that sort of commiseration, I guess, that I really appreciate with my peers. So,
Is that ever a frustration, though? Because I know there's a playwright here in America, Kira Hudas from Puerto Rico, and she wrote this amazing piece in American Theater magazine about being very frustrated with taking her Puerto Rican heritage and constantly putting it on stage for majority white audiences and not being able to reach an audience that she walked away from playwriting for a good couple of years because of that. Is that ever a frustration?
I wouldn't say I would be frustrated enough to quit, because at least I think that's that one good thing about my stubbornness. Like I'm not ever gonna quit.
Can't
writing.
Stop. Right.
Yeah. Just cause I can't find, I mean, I definitely struggle. I felt like I've doubted my ability to write a story that moves people, and I still struggle with it. I like stuff like perfectionism and even struggling with forming consistent habits. Like those are things that most, if not all, writers go through. But yeah, I think because writing is really close to me, like I feel like it's saved me at times, like fiction itself. So I can't imagine myself letting that go, like that lifeline, letting that lifeline go.
That's why I find when people give writing tips, I find them a little absurd. I think half of writing is finding out the best way for yourself to get the good writing out. What is your routine? Yeah. What is kind of what has developed into this is how I get my best work?
Well,
is this a secret? Should we not?
No, it's not. No, I run writing sprints with some online friends, writing sprints. So we set a time for like maybe 15, 20 minutes and then we just go ham, like rough draft and as much as you can, all the words, anything. And sometimes it doesn't work as well, Sometimes in 15 minutes, I'll get like 10 words. but yeah, sometimes you just need that outside force to, put you into gear. So that's one thing. And yeah, I listen to a lot of music also. It's mostly noise, I think. Noise, which I don't know, it's something to drown out the doubts and anxieties in my mind. So that also helps. So those who think the music, community, even just online, yeah.
I actually hear that a lot from writers. Do you listen to the same song over and over? Do you have to be familiar with the music that you're listening to while you write so that you're not getting clued into the story to make it noise? Or does it have to be brand new so it's always something that you've never engaged with before? What is your music of choice for your writing?
It's definitely something I've already heard and something I've put on loop many, many times. So it has to be something I really like. I know the song in and out and then it just kind of fades in the background. So it could be with lyrics or without. So yeah, I put video game soundtracks on loop sometimes, mostly, and also heavy metal because they're noisy and I can't understand what they're saying. Yeah, stuff like that.
One of my kiddos is autistic, and to study, they listen to a lot of audiobooks, but only ones they've listened to 10, 15, 20 times. So I'll just walk in and it's Dune or it's Anna Karenina, and it's just a wall of familiarity that they've now memorized so much. They can translate, they've read like the French edition, they've read like the Spanish language edition because they've got it so as part of that wall of noise that helps them concentrate with schoolwork. So I'm always fascinated by the sound aspects of neurodivergence. So it helps finding that white noise.
Feels very comforting and safe. Like, yeah, that familiarity. So I totally get that.
Is there any music that doesn't work? Like if there's a real story going on, is there stuff that you just can't deal with?
So far, not really. Or if it's a song that I've heard and I don't like it, then I'll be distracted. I'll be, put that away. That'll break me from my thoughts. But I like most things. I like chill songs also. I like folk songs. I've discovered. Yeah, folk songs from Taiwan. Indigenous peoples from Taiwan. They have some really great bands in there. Yeah.
And it's stuff you can write to?
Yeah, I've written to them.
Oh, that's great.
This band called Collage, and they sing in Mandarin and also in indigenous Amis and also Japanese, which, wow, I'm like, yeah, I'm also fascinated by the languages, the variety. So yeah, their songs have definitely inspired me as well. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Does that translate into like film and television as well? Like older pieces that you can kind of take from there? Or is that just that the visual interrupts too much?
Yeah, I've never tried to write with the TV on. I think, yeah, that's just takes my eyes off my keyboard too long. I don't know. Yeah, I'm more on the auditory aspect when I'm writing. The noise.
Yeah. I used to have to do it where I'd have music on that I knew, and I don't follow baseball. So I'd have to watch a baseball game, and it would be just repetitive. It would be this repetitive visual and this music I knew. And then, because baseball won any game means nothing to me. I'd look up, they're in a blue uniform. I'd look up, they're in a red uniform. I'd look up, it's a blue uniform. And it just shut down whatever needed to be shut down. So then I could work. It's fantastic. Until it wasn't baseball season anymore. So,
yeah, great process.
Yeah. So if you had, and I guess this is a good final question for you, when you're creating these kind of world, what is better for you as like an utter dream project? Like creating this just endless kind of world and like building these big books and building these kind of, I don't know, Game of Thrones kind of vast Wheel of Time kind of mythologies and exploring everything in one fantastical universe, or just using that world building skill to be like, here's a piece of this one. Here's a piece of this. This one works better for an authoritarian piece here. This works better for Cli-Fi here. Like what if you had it all in a kind of publishing situation? Which one would appeal to you the most of all?
Oh, wow. That is a difficult question. I've never thought about it before. I think that I'd go for the second one where it's not all connected. But at the same time, if it's not all connected, there can still be some pieces linked together here and there. So I'm not totally confined with just everything's in one piece. There can still be like offshoots of it, things like that. And yeah, if everything's in one piece, I couldn't do the thing where I have this same character appearing in different stories, like Mei Fong. That's my punching bag character. She's in a few of my short stories so far. And if she's all the same character in each one, but they're all their contained universes. So I felt like I couldn't do that if I just did one big epic world.
Yeah.
I lose the fun in that.
I wasn't sure I could ask that if Mei Fong is you. I wasn't sure if that was your, once I saw the name, I was like, is that the avatar? Is that the one where you're like, this is, okay, it's this, so I'm going to inject myself here. If that was code to your readers. Is it?
It could be. It could be. Who could say?
It'll be, the readers can decide.
Yeah. I've actually gone so far as using a variation of my actual name. I'm not going to tell you which story it is because I'm a bit embarrassed about it.
Let's save that for the memoirs. So
yeah.
We'll get to that. Excellent. Well, I really, really appreciate you coming on to talk to us today. It has been an amazing experience going through your work. And honestly, I can't wait to read more. You're such a powerful writer, and it's so much fun to be, even when it's apocalyptic. They're just such rich worlds, and they just build such images in my head that I'm just delighted that you would spend some time with us today. So I really appreciate it.
Oh gosh, it's my pleasure, That's high praise, and it really means a lot to me that you reached out, and I get to talk about this, about my writing, and even through the awkwardness. I don't sound great, I know, sorry.
Oh, but you do. This is perfect. So I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, you're so kind. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I read constantly, and there's so much that I'm like, I've read this before, or, oh, I've read something like this before, or, oh, this person's doing this. So when you find somebody that the style and the narrative is so fully formed, and you're just like, oh, this comes from nothing. It's so fun to just devour that as a reader. So that's why I just constantly read. So I'm always looking for that experience. And I certainly got that experience with your writing. So
thank goodness.
Oh, yeah. I can't lie very easily. So if I didn't at all, it would just like, ugh. So again, I really appreciate it.
That's awesome, man.
Oh, do you have another piece you wanted to share with our illustrious listeners?
Yeah. I also wanted to share this poem from Strange Horizons. Where is Ligaya? Day 22. Neon flicker, lightning strike, fluorescent spark. The walls are pink. The tiles are cold. While you sit, the clothes spin behind the round glass door. Speed Queen washing machine. Creak, rumble, thump. You scramble on your knees, slipping over tiles, cold. Bruising, put your hands on the machine, bent, rusted, and battered. Look through the soap, the suds, the sopping wet clothes, tumbling round and round. See the little girl swimming in her old shirt, smiling, happy. Creak, rumble, thump. You lost her again. Ligaya, from Tagalog. Happiness, joy. Find her. Don't give up. She's out there somewhere. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Are you still working? How many more do you already have booked? How many more are going to come out?
I think I've only published about 4 or 3 of these, but there's about, I have 10 and counting. But yeah, it's still a work in progress. So yeah, I'm definitely still thinking about Ligaya. It lives in my mind rent free.
It was an excellent series. Oh, thank you for that. And our listeners, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And that was Caroline Hung. You can follow her on Blue Sky at Caroline Hung, no spaces. Carolinehung.bluesky.social. Where you can read her ongoing 1,000 Days of Drabble. Numbers 11 through 14 dropped last week. I'd also recommend visiting her official author site, Caroline Hung Author, all one word, .com, for links to all her short fiction and poetry. For the story Moon Rabbit Song, there's an audio version online as well, narrated by Susan Hanfield and Justine Iyer on the Nightmare Magazine website. If you hit listen on the story's landing site, it begins around minute 12:45. Thanks for listening. See you next time. NDAF. NDAF is produced by Ken Plume, and our theme song is by Mike Furman.